Have you ever felt like your prayers were hitting the ceiling instead of heaven, like your faith used to feel strong but now it feels quiet and distant, like something inside you still believes in God but something inside you is also tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of wondering when your breakthrough will finally arrive? Because today I need you to listen carefully, not casually but deeply with your heart open, because this message is not random and it is not coincidence that you are hearing this right now, since there are moments in life when God does not just speak to encourage you but He speaks to reposition you, to awaken you, to transform the very foundation of how you understand Him and how you understand yourself. And this is one of those moments, because what you are about to realize today can permanently change the way you pray, the way you wait, the way you trust, and the way you walk through storms without fear ever again, since the truth most believers never fully understand is that faith was never meant to be something fragile that only survives when life feels comfortable, but faith was designed by God to become strongest exactly in the places where everything else seems uncertain. And the reason many people feel their faith shaking right now is not because God has left them, but because God is strengthening them in ways they did not expect. And if you have been wondering why your life feels slower than everyone else's, why doors you expected to open remained closed, why answers you prayed for did not arrive on your timeline, then listen closely, because sometimes the silence of God is not rejection but preparation, and sometimes the waiting season is not punishment but positioning, and sometimes the reason nothing is moving around you is because everything is moving inside you in ways you cannot yet see. But soon you will understand that the delay you feared was actually protection you needed, and the closed door that confused you was actually direction from heaven guiding you towards something greater than you imagined. Because God never wastes a season in your life, even when it feels empty, even when it feels lonely, even when it feels invisible to everyone around you. And what makes this message different from the ones you have heard before is that today you are not just being reminded to believe, but you are being invited to see your entire story through a new lens, where every struggle has purpose, every setback has strategy, and every unanswered prayer has hidden intention. Because the truth is, faith does not grow when everything makes sense. Faith grows when nothing makes sense, but you choose to trust God anyway. And there are people listening right now who almost gave up last week, people who smiled in front of others but quietly wondered if God still remembered their name, people who kept praying even when their voice felt weaker than before. And if that sounds like you, then understand this. Clearly your faith has not been failing, it has been fighting. And the very fact that you are still here, still listening, still searching, still hoping means something inside you refuses to quit, even when everything around you suggests that quitting would be easier. And that stubborn hope inside you is not weakness, it is evidence that God is still working in your life. Because when God plants purpose inside someone, He also plants endurance inside them, and sometimes that endurance shows up as the simple decision to keep believing one more day, even when yesterday was heavy and tomorrow feels uncertain. And what many believers never realize is that faith is not proven when miracles happen. Faith is proven when miracles have not happened yet and you still trust that they will, because real faith does not say I believe after I see. Real faith says I believe even before I see. And the reason this message can change your faith forever is because once you understand that God is not measuring your life by your visible progress but by your invisible growth, You will stop comparing your timeline to everyone else's timeline and start recognizing that your journey is being written with intention, not randomness. And there are moments when God allows confusion not because He enjoys watching you struggle, but because clarity arrives stronger after confusion than it ever could without it. And there are moments when God allows distance not because He is abandoning you, but because He is teaching you to walk closer to Him instead of closer to comfort. And there are moments when God allows storms not because He wants to scare you, but because storms reveal strength inside you that calm seasons never could. And right now there are people listening who thought they were falling apart when in reality they were being rebuilt. There are people who thought they were being delayed when in reality they were being redirected. And there are people who thought they were being ignored when in reality heaven was preparing something bigger than they expected. Because sometimes the greatest transformation in your life begins the moment you stop asking why is this happening to me and start asking what is God preparing inside me through this. And the shift between those two questions is the difference between frustration and faith, because frustration looks at circumstances but faith looks at purpose. And when your perspective changes, your strength changes, and when your strength changes, your decisions change, and when your decisions change, your future begins changing even before your situation does. And that is why the enemy works so hard to convince you that nothing is happening in your life, because if he can convince you nothing is happening, he can convince you to stop believing before your breakthrough arrives. But what he cannot stop is what God has already started inside you, because once God begins writing a story in someone's life, no disappointment, no delay, no mistake, and no obstacle can cancel what heaven has already planned. And there are people listening right now who needed to hear this exact reminder today, because you have been stronger than you give yourself credit for. You have survived moments you once believed would break you completely. You kept moving forward when you felt like standing still would be easier, and you kept trusting even when trusting felt risky. And that kind of faith does not disappear, it multiplies, because God never ignores endurance, He rewards it. And sometimes the reward does not arrive immediately. But when it arrives with confirmation that every prayer you whispered, every tear you cried, and every moment you refused to give up was seen by heaven even when nobody else noticed. And what changes your faith forever is the realization that God was never absent from your hardest season. He was active in ways you could not yet recognize. And the moment you begin seeing your past through that truth, your fear about the future begins losing its power, because if God carried you through what you already survived, then He will carry you through what you are facing now. And that is why today is not just another message, it is a turning point, because once you understand that your story is not random, your waiting is not wasted, your struggle is not meaningless, and your faith is not fragile, then something inside you begins standing taller than before, something inside you begins believing stronger than before, and something inside you begins expecting greater things ahead than anything behind you. And when expectation returns, faith returns, and when faith returns, strength returns, and when strength returns, everything about the way you walk through life begins changing forever. And what many people don't realize is that the moment you felt the most confused, the most delayed, the most rejected, and the most forgotten was actually the exact moment God quietly began rearranging things behind the scenes in your favor, because heaven does not panic when your life looks uncertain, and God never loses control just because you cannot yet see the outcome. And there are doors that close not because you failed, but because they were never meant to hold your future. And there were people who walked away not because you were unworthy, but because their assignment in your story had already finished. and sometimes God allows silence not to ignore you but to strengthen your trust so deeply that when the breakthrough finally arrives you will know without doubt that it was not coincidence, not luck, not timing created by humans, but the unmistakable hand of God moving in your life at the perfect moment you were prepared to receive it, because there are blessings that cannot enter your life while you are still carrying yesterday's fear, and there are miracles that cannot land in your hands while your heart is still holding on to what God already asked you to release, and maybe that is why this season felt heavier than expected, because God was not just changing your situation, He was changing your capacity to carry what He is about to give you, and what is coming next will require a stronger version of you. A braver version of you, a more faithful version of you that refuses to quit even when nothing makes sense, and I truly believe that if you are still watching this message right now it is not by accident, because there is something shifting in your life already, even if your eyes cannot yet recognize it, even if your surroundings still look the same, even if the answers have not appeared yet. Because God often begins His greatest work in places that look the most ordinary, and He often prepares His biggest miracles inside seasons that feel the most invisible, and the truth is your delay is not denial, and your struggle is not punishment, and your waiting is not wasted time but preparation time, alignment time, strengthening time. And there are prayers you whispered months ago that heaven is still responding to right now in ways you cannot yet see, but soon you will look back at this exact season and realize that what felt like silence was actually protection, and what felt like confusion was actually direction, and what felt like weakness was actually God building a foundation strong enough to support the blessing that is about to enter your life in a way no person can stop, and no situation can block, and no doubt can cancel, because when God decides it is your moment, nothing on earth can close what heaven has already opened for you. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, because whenever God begins to move someone toward destiny, He first allows them to walk through a season where nothing feels stable and everything feels uncertain, and maybe that is exactly where you are today, wondering why doors closed, why people changed, why plans failed, why prayers seemed delayed. But what if I told you that the silence you thought was abandonment was actually preparation, because God never removes something from your life unless He is making space for something greater, and sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that the pain you are experiencing is not punishment but positioning, not rejection but redirection, not the end but the beginning of a chapter that will later make perfect sense when you finally see what God was protecting you from and what He was preparing you for. Folded hands. You have to understand that before every major breakthrough in Scripture there was always a season where everything looked impossible, because before the sea opened Moses stood trapped between the water and the army. Before the promise came, Abraham waited in confusion for years. Before the crown came, David ran through caves hiding for his life. And before the resurrection, there was a cross that looked like defeat, which means the situation you are standing in right now may not be evidence that God forgot you, but evidence that He is about to do something you could never do on your own. Something that will make people look at your life and realize this could only be the hand of God moving behind the scenes, even when nobody else could see it sparkle. Sometimes the reason God allows the waiting season to feel so heavy is because He is strengthening something inside you that cannot grow in comfort. Because faith does not grow when everything is easy and predictable, but when you choose to trust Him even when the outcome is unclear and the answers are delayed and the road feels lonely. And the truth is, there are moments when heaven is quiet, not because God stopped listening but because He is working in places you cannot see yet, aligning people you have not met yet, opening doors you have not reached yet, and preparing blessings that are bigger than what you originally asked for. And that is why giving up right now would mean walking away just before the moment everything begins to change. Sunrise. There are people watching your life who think your story is already finished, who assumed your best days were behind you, who believed the mistakes you made defined your future. But what they do not understand is that God specializes in rewriting stories that looked impossible to restore. And the same God who turned fishermen into leaders, weakness into strength, and fear into courage is still moving today in ways that human eyes cannot always recognize immediately. Which means your current chapter is not the conclusion but the setup for a testimony that will speak louder than anything you could have planned yourself. Dizzy right now. God is teaching you something deeper than success and stronger than comfort, because He is teaching you dependence on Him, and dependence on God is where real strength begins, because when you stop relying only on what you can control and start trusting what He is doing behind the scenes, you begin to experience a peace that does not make sense to people around you. A confidence that cannot be explained by circumstances, and a hope that stays alive even when everything else feels uncertain. And that is the kind of faith that carries people through storms that were never meant to destroy them but only meant to reveal how strong they had already become through God's presence in their life. Water wave. There is a reason you survived what you thought would break you. There is a reason you kept moving forward even when your heart felt tired. There is a reason something inside you refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier, because God placed something inside your spirit that refuses to surrender to defeat, something that keeps whispering that your story is not over yet and your purpose is still ahead of you. And the enemy may have tried to convince you that your delays were denials, but God is reminding you right now that delays are often the hidden form of divine protection, keeping you from places that looked good but were never meant for your destiny. Fire. You might not realize it yet, but the very thing that hurt you the most may become the very thing God uses to help someone else find hope through your story. Because your pain has purpose and your struggle has meaning and your waiting has direction, even when it feels confusing in the moment. And one day you will look back at this season and realize that what felt like weakness was actually strength being built quietly inside you, and what felt like loss was actually preparation for something you were not ready to receive before but are becoming ready for now. So if today you are feeling tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of believing when nothing seems to change, hear this clearly, because this message is for you right now at exactly the right time. God is not late in your life, and He is not silent without reason, and He is not distant from your situation. He is closer than you think, working in ways you cannot measure and preparing answers you cannot see yet. And the moment you choose to keep trusting instead of quitting may become the turning point, where everything begins to shift in a way that proves your faith was never wasted and your waiting was never meaningless, and your future is still filled with promises that are stronger than your fears and greater than your doubts. Have you ever noticed that just when you thought everything was finally coming together, something unexpected happened and it felt like God quietly changed the direction of your life again, and in that moment you wondered if you misunderstood His promise? But what you didn't realize is that God was not canceling your blessing, He was repositioning you for something far greater than what you were originally praying for. Because sometimes God will move you away from what looks good so He can lead you toward what is truly right for your destiny. And the truth is, the reason things feel confusing right now is because heaven is working behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet see, but your spirit is beginning to sense it. There are seasons when God prepares you in silence, because if He showed you everything at once, your fear would stop you from walking forward. So instead He strengthens your faith step by step, moment by moment, teaching you how to trust Him even when the path does not make sense, and even when people around you don't understand why you are still holding on. Because deep inside your heart you can feel that something is changing and something is shifting and something is being aligned in your life. That cannot be stopped by delays, opinions, or obstacles. Sometimes God allows doors to close not because you failed, but because those doors were too small for where He is taking you next. And what feels like rejection right now is actually protection that will make sense later when you look back and realize He saved you from settling for less than what He planned for your future. And the reason this season has been so uncomfortable is because growth always stretches you before it elevates you, and transformation always feels unfamiliar before it becomes your testimony. God is teaching you patience in this season, not as punishment but as preparation, because what He is about to place in your hands requires a stronger heart, a clearer vision, and a deeper faith than you had before. And that is why the waiting has felt longer than expected and the silence has felt heavier than usual. But even in the silence, God has been working on details you cannot control, and connections you cannot see, and opportunities that are already being arranged in your favor. There are moments when you questioned whether you were still on the right path, because progress seemed slower than you hoped and answers seemed farther than you expected. But God wants you to understand that delay does not mean denial, and silence does not mean absence, and confusion does not mean He has forgotten about you. Because while you were worrying about what was not happening, God was preparing something that will surprise you in ways you never imagined. What you are experiencing right now is not random, and it is not wasted time, and it is not a mistake, because every closed door, every unexpected turn, every difficult conversation, and every quiet night where you wondered what God was doing has been shaping your spirit for the moment when everything finally begins to make sense. And when that moment comes, you will realize that nothing you went through was meaningless and nothing you experienced was unnecessary. God is building strength inside you that cannot be shaken by circumstances, because the blessing He is preparing for you will require courage and confidence that only comes from walking through uncertainty with faith and continuing to trust Him even when you did not have all the answers, and even when the road ahead looked unclear. There is something powerful about a person who keeps moving forward even when they don't understand the full picture, because that kind of faith moves heaven, and that kind of trust opens doors no human effort could ever unlock. And God sees the quiet strength you have been carrying even when nobody else noticed, and He sees the prayers you whispered when nobody else was listening, and He sees the tears you wiped away when nobody else understood what you were feeling. You are not standing where you are by accident, and you are not walking through this season without purpose, because God is positioning you exactly where you need to be before the next chapter begins. And even though it feels slow right now, and even though it feels uncertain right now, something important is already unfolding in your favor, and something powerful is already moving closer to you. The reason you felt pulled away from certain places and certain people recently is because God was protecting your future from distractions that would have delayed your destiny. And sometimes separation is not loss but preparation, and sometimes distance is not punishment but direction, and sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of the breakthrough you have been praying for all along. God is not finished writing your story, and He is not finished preparing your path, and He is not finished shaping your future, because what He started in your life He is faithful to complete, and even if today feels unclear, tomorrow will carry confirmation that He has been guiding your steps the entire time, and very soon you will begin to see signs that everything you walked through was leading you exactly where you were meant to be all along. Something powerful is happening behind the scenes of your life right now, even if everything around you still looks the same, even if the doors still seem closed, even if the answers still haven't arrived, because there comes a moment in every faith journey when heaven goes silent, not because God has stepped away from you, but because He is carefully arranging things in your favor that your eyes are not yet ready to see. And this is the moment many people misunderstand. This is the moment many people quit. This is the moment many people assume nothing is changing, when in reality everything is shifting underneath the surface, and what you are experiencing right now is not delay but preparation, not rejection but protection, not confusion but positioning for something greater than what you originally asked for. You may feel like you are standing in the same place you were months ago, maybe even years ago, wondering why your prayers seem unanswered and your efforts unnoticed, but what you don't realize is that the silence you are facing is not empty, it is sacred, it is intentional, it is filled with unseen movement that is aligning people, opportunities, timing, and purpose in ways you cannot yet measure. Because God never wastes a season, and He never allows your waiting to be meaningless. Every moment you stay faithful when quitting would be easier is building a foundation strong enough to carry the blessing that is coming toward you. There are things you asked for that you thought would arrive quickly, but if they had come when you first prayed for them, they would have crushed you instead of elevating you, distracted you instead of strengthening you, confused you instead of clarifying your purpose, and sometimes what feels like a closed door is actually mercy in disguise. Sometimes what feels like a missed opportunity is actually divine redirection. And sometimes what feels like loss is actually the beginning of alignment with something far better than what you thought you wanted. Right now there are battles being fought for you that you cannot see, conversations happening about you that you did not initiate, and doors being prepared for you that no human effort alone could open, and even though your surroundings may still look ordinary, your story is entering an extraordinary chapter that will make sense of the confusion you once carried, because when God prepares a breakthrough He does it in layers, quietly, patiently, perfectly, and suddenly one day what once looked impossible begins to move in your direction faster than you expected. This is why you cannot give up now. This is why you cannot let fear rewrite your faith. This is why you cannot allow disappointment to become your conclusion, because the very moment you feel like stopping is often the exact moment your situation is closest to changing, and many people walk away just before their answer arrives simply because they mistake the silence for absence instead of understanding it as preparation. Think about how many times in your life something did not happen the way you expected, but later you realized it protected you from pain you could not see at the time. Think about how many doors closed that eventually made room for better ones to open. Think about how many moments felt confusing but later became part of a bigger story that made perfect sense. And what if this season you are in right now is another one of those moments? What if this pause is not punishment but positioning? What if this waiting season is actually building the strength you will need for what is coming next? You are not forgotten, you are not overlooked, and you are definitely not behind schedule, because God does not operate on human timelines and He does not measure your progress the way people around you do. He measures your growth by your faith, your endurance, your obedience, and your willingness to trust even when clarity has not yet arrived, and those qualities are being shaped inside you right now whether you realize it or not. There is a reason you still feel a quiet hope inside your heart even after everything you have faced. There is a reason you keep moving forward even when the path feels uncertain. There is a reason you are still listening to messages like this at exactly the time you needed encouragement, and that reason is because something is closer than you think. Something is forming that will restore what you thought was lost and open what you thought was permanently closed. So don't let this moment discourage you, don't let this silence convince you that nothing is happening, and don't let temporary confusion make you forget the promises that were planted in your spirit, because the same God who carried you through your hardest nights is already preparing the next chapter of your life. And when that chapter begins, you will finally understand why the waiting lasted longer than you expected and why the path looked different than you imagined, and you will realize that every step you took in faith was leading you exactly where you were meant to be. Before this message continues, you need to understand something very important right now. The delay you are experiencing is not a denial, the silence you are hearing is not abandonment, and the confusion you are feeling is not a mistake, because when God begins preparing someone for a breakthrough that will change their entire life, He first separates them from the noise, the wrong doors, the wrong expectations, and even sometimes the people they thought would stay forever. And that season feels uncomfortable, lonely, and heavy, but it is actually the moment heaven starts moving behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet see. And if you are watching this right now, it is not random, because God is reminding you that what looks like things falling apart is actually things being rearranged in your favor. There are moments in your life when you prayed for clarity but instead received silence, when you asked God for direction but instead found yourself standing still, and during those moments the enemy tried to convince you that nothing was happening, but what you did not realize was that God was protecting you from doors that looked good but were never meant for your destiny. And sometimes His greatest protection feels like rejection, because He can see what you cannot see and He knows where each wrong path would have taken you if He had allowed you to walk through it. Right now something powerful is happening in your story, even if you cannot fully recognize it yet, because God never wastes a season of waiting, He never ignores a prayer spoken in faith, and He never forgets a heart that trusted Him when things did not make sense. And what you are walking through is not punishment but preparation, because the blessing that is coming into your life requires a stronger version of you, a wiser version of you, and a faith-filled version of you that refuses to quit, even when nothing around you looks like progress. Some of the struggles you faced recently were not meant to break you but to reveal the strength God already placed inside you before the foundation of your life was even formed, and every tear you cried, every night you stayed awake wondering why things were taking so long, and every moment you questioned whether your prayers were heard has actually been recorded in heaven as evidence of your endurance, your loyalty, and your faith. And God is not ignoring that faith, because He is building something through you that will become a testimony powerful enough to encourage people you have never even met yet. The truth is, there are blessings that only arrive after battles, because some doors only open once you become the person capable of walking through them without losing your purpose. And God has been shaping your heart quietly in ways nobody else noticed, teaching you patience when you wanted speed, teaching you trust when you wanted certainty, and teaching you surrender when you wanted control. And those lessons are not random because they are preparing you for the moment when everything begins to change faster than you expected. There is a shift coming into your life that will make sense of the confusion you walked through earlier, and one day soon you will look back at this season and realize that what felt like delay was actually divine alignment, what felt like silence was actually protection, and what felt like weakness was actually God strengthening your foundation so the blessing He is bringing into your life would never collapse under pressure. So if your heart has been tired recently, if your prayers have felt heavier than usual, and if you have been wondering whether God is still working in your situation, this is your reminder that He has never stopped moving on your behalf even for a single second. And the very fact that you are still standing today means your story is not finished yet, because God does not bring someone this far just to leave them in the middle of the journey. He always completes what He begins, and your breakthrough is closer than it looks right now. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, because God often does His deepest work in silence before He reveals His greatest miracles in public, and the reason the pressure has increased, the reason the waiting has stretched longer than you expected, and the reason certain doors closed when you prayed for them to open is not because God forgot you, but because He is protecting the version of your future that is bigger than the version of your plans. And even though some nights you questioned whether your prayers were being heard and some mornings you woke up carrying a heaviness you could not explain, heaven was still moving on your behalf in ways you could not measure with your eyes. Because God never wastes pain, He never ignores tears, and He never delays without purpose. And what you are experiencing right now is not rejection but redirection towards something that will make sense later when you look back and realize that every delay was actually preparation for stability, every disappointment was protection from something smaller than your calling, and every moment of confusion was training your faith to trust beyond what you could control, because God is not just changing your situation, He is changing you so that when the blessing finally arrives you will have the strength to carry it without losing your peace. And there were seasons in your life when you thought you were ready earlier, but if God had opened the door back then, the pressure would have crushed you instead of promoting you. Which is why this season has been shaping your patience, strengthening your endurance, and quietly building your confidence in Him instead of in circumstances. And even though people around you may not understand why your journey looks slower or different, God is writing a story through your life that cannot be rushed and cannot be copied, because your testimony is being prepared to reach someone else who is standing exactly where you once stood, wondering if breakthrough would ever come. And what you are feeling right now is the tension between where you used to be and where God is taking you, and that tension is not meant to break you but to stretch you into a stronger version of yourself who can walk through doors without fear and stand in blessings without insecurity. Because the same God who carried you through confusion is now positioning you for clarity, and the same God who protected you through hidden seasons is about to reveal why those hidden seasons were necessary, and there is a shift happening in your spirit even if your surroundings have not changed yet, because faith always moves before evidence appears and obedience always prepares the ground before harvest begins. So do not mistake silence for absence, and do not mistake waiting for failure, because something greater than what you imagined is being arranged behind the scenes right now, and the truth is that the enemy tried to convince you that your story had slowed down, but God says your story has been strengthening. The enemy tried to convince you that opportunities passed you by, but God says He saved the right opportunity for the right moment. and the enemy tried to convince you that you were walking alone, but God says He was guiding every step even when you could not feel His hand. Which means this season is not the ending you feared but the turning point you prayed for, and very soon you will recognize that the struggle you survived built the courage you needed, and the patience you practiced built the character you now carry, and the faith you protected in private is about to produce results in public that will remind you that nothing you trusted God with was ever wasted. So keep moving forward with confidence even if the road still looks quiet, because quiet seasons are often the birthplace of loud testimonies, and what God is preparing for you is closer than it feels right now and stronger than what tried to stop you and more perfect than anything you could have planned on your own. And this next step in your journey will not just change your situation, but it will confirm that God was working for you the entire time, even when you thought nothing was happening. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, because when God begins to shift seasons, He often works in silence before He works in public, and the reason you have felt pressure increasing, confusion surrounding you, and delays stretching longer than expected is not because God stepped away from your story, but because He is carefully positioning you for a moment that will change everything about your future. And what you must understand today is this: the waiting season was never empty, it was preparation. The closed doors were never rejection, they were protection. And the silence you feared was actually God building strength inside you that could never be built any other way, because the blessing that is coming next into your life is not small, it is not temporary, and it is not ordinary. It is the kind of breakthrough that requires a stronger version of you to carry it without losing it. Right now God is teaching you how to stand when you cannot see results, how to trust when you cannot hear answers, and how to keep moving forward when nothing around you makes sense, because faith is not proven when everything is working out easily. Faith is proven when your heart still believes while your eyes see nothing changing yet, and heaven has been watching your consistency, your quiet prayers, your private tears, your late-night conversations with God that nobody else knows about, and those moments were never wasted because God always honors persistence that refuses to quit. There were times you almost walked away, times you questioned whether your effort mattered, times you wondered if maybe you misunderstood God's direction for your life, but even in those moments when your strength felt low, God was still guiding your steps behind the scenes, still blocking the wrong opportunities, still redirecting the wrong connections, still protecting you from paths that looked promising but would have stolen your peace later. Because sometimes the greatest miracle God performs is not what He gives you but what He keeps away from you. What is happening now is a turning point, because God does not allow seasons of stretching without preparing seasons of release. He does not allow long nights without planning a powerful morning, and He does not allow faithful people to remain unseen forever, which means the pressure you survived was not meaningless, the patience you practiced was not unnoticed, and the obedience you continued even when nobody applauded you has already moved heaven in your direction in ways you cannot yet imagine. You may not realize it yet, but the strength you gained in this season is the very reason you will not lose what is coming next, because God never releases a blessing before He builds the character required to protect it, and the version of you that started this journey could not have handled what is about to arrive, but the version of you standing today, stronger, wiser, calmer, deeper in faith, is ready for doors that once seemed impossible to open. Something is shifting right now in your favor even if nothing around you looks different yet, because God often begins miracles invisibly before they become visible, and while you were waiting, heaven was arranging conversations you did not hear, aligning opportunities you did not see, and preparing connections that will recognize your value at exactly the right moment, not too early and not too late, but perfectly on time the way only God can do it. So do not lose your confidence now, do not slow your faith now, and do not question your journey now, because you are closer than you think to a moment that will explain why the delay had to happen the way it did, and when that moment arrives you will look back at this season and realize that God was never late, never silent, and never absent. He was preparing something greater than what you originally asked for, something stronger than what you originally expected, and something more meaningful than what you originally imagined, and very soon you will step into that new chapter with a testimony that proves God was working for you the entire time. There is a moment in every faith journey when everything begins to change quietly before it changes visibly, and what many people do not realize is that you are standing inside that exact moment right now because the pressure you have been feeling lately is not random, the waiting you have been experiencing is not accidental, and the uncertainty you have been walking through is not a sign that God forgot you. It is a sign that God is preparing to move you into a new level that requires deeper trust, stronger faith, and a heart that no longer depends on circumstances to stay steady, because the truth is that God never brings someone this far just to leave them in confusion, and He never allows long seasons of testing without planning seasons of testimony that reveal why everything had to happen the way it did. What you thought was delay was actually divine timing protecting your future. What you thought was silence was actually God working behind the scenes in ways your eyes could not yet recognize, and what you thought was loss was actually God removing what could not go with you into the next chapter of your life. Because sometimes God answers prayers not by opening doors immediately but by closing the wrong ones first so that when the right one finally opens you walk through it with confidence. Instead of confusion, clarity instead of doubt, and peace instead of pressure. There were moments when you felt like nothing was changing no matter how hard you prayed, no matter how patiently you waited, and no matter how faithfully you continued moving forward, but what you could not see during those moments was that heaven was already arranging things in your favor, already aligning people who will recognize your value, already positioning opportunities that will match the calling on your life, and already preparing answers that will arrive at exactly the moment you need them most instead of the moment you expected them first. God has been shaping your heart during this season in ways that are deeper than you realize because before He releases new responsibilities He builds new strength, before He opens bigger doors He develops stronger faith, and before He reveals clearer direction He teaches you how to trust Him even when the path ahead looks uncertain, because the blessing that is coming into your life next is not something temporary or fragile. It is something designed to last, something designed to grow, and something designed to remind you that everything you went through had a purpose greater than what you understood at the time. You are not the same person you were when this journey started, and that change inside you is proof that God has been working even when you thought nothing was happening, because the patience you learned, the courage you developed, and the faith you held on to during difficult moments have already prepared you for opportunities that once would have overwhelmed you but will now strengthen you, and this is exactly why you must not give up now, must not step back now, and must not doubt the direction God has been leading you, because the next step ahead of you carries answers connected to everything you prayed about earlier in your life. There is something powerful about staying faithful when results are not visible yet, because faith that survives uncertainty always produces testimony that surprises everyone who thought your situation would never change. And what God is doing right now is positioning you for one of those moments where the same people who saw your struggle will soon see your breakthrough and realize that what looked impossible was actually preparation for something extraordinary that only God could arrange. So keep moving forward with confidence even if the path still looks quiet, keep trusting even if the answers still feel delayed, and keep believing even if the outcome is not visible yet, because the chapter you are about to enter will make sense of everything you walked through before, and when that moment finally arrives you will understand that God was never late, never distant, and never silent. He was carefully preparing a future for you that is stronger, clearer, and greater than anything you could have planned on your own. And very soon you will step into that promise with a testimony that proves your waiting season was never wasted.